Brooklyn Donahue grows up adoring her successful father.
My dad is a very driven alpha male, and that's what I was looking for when I was looking for a partner.
Then Paul Carter roars into her life with style.
Paul showed up in a bright yellow sports car. He was very sexual and very driven, and I appealed to him. That made me feel great.
But soon, the thrill ride gets out of control.
We gave him the moniker the Casanova con man because his biggest cons were of women.
He's an opportunist, and he's a scoundrel.
All these revelations are coming out from people who he has ripped off.
This is where things took a dangerous turn, and he made a threat against her life.
You can't get away from a predator.
And Brooklyn's ride into the sunset comes crashing down around her.
I went out and bought myself a rifle. I was terrified of what might happen. I grew up in Australia, in a fairly rural area, on a cow farm. My favourite memories of being on the farm was spending time with my father on Saturday mornings. I had two younger brothers who were both asthmatics, so they didn't spend time out on the farm, which made spending time with my dad more special to me. That was the only one-on-one time that I got to spend with him.
Andrew Facey, Brooklyn's father, is a wealthy fourth-generation real estate developer in Melbourne.
When I was a kid, I thought my dad was a superhero. He took over his father's real estate business when he was 18 years old, and he expanded the business very significantly.
Brooklyn's mother is a beautiful socialite.
I had a very difficult relationship with my mother. There was the expectation that I was going to be as thin and as beautiful as what she was. And it didn't seem to matter what I did. It was never good enough for her. And it's caused a significant amount of trauma in my life.
Brooklyn wants to follow in her father's footsteps one day, but here too, she meets with rejection.
My intention was to take over the family business, but my father is somewhat old school in that he likes to keep the men in the business and the women at home.
Her dad does agree to support her financially, and Brooklyn sets her sights on college. But then, disaster strikes.
When I was 18 years old, I had a head-on collision with a truck. I had a closed head injury, my face and jaw was smashed, and I have since had 54 orthopedic surgeries to rebuild my body. I spent most of the year either in a wheelchair or on crutches, but I managed to get through that year at college.
Brooklyn eventually finishes her degree, but rethinks her future.
I couldn't spend time standing and on my feet all day, which is what's required if you're in real estate. One of the things that interested me was esthetician. So I did a course in that, and then I opened my own business in a gym in Melbourne. I met my first husband at the gym after one of the surgeries. After my car accident, I felt like I had been smashed into pieces, and I felt that nobody was going to want me. So as soon as somebody did come along that appeared interested in me, I feel like I kind of latched onto that.
The couple marry in 1996 when Brooklyn is 27, and she gives birth to her first son a year later.
By the time I was pregnant with my second son, I was working and I had a toddler, and my patience with my husband was really just running low. I said to him, "You're going to have to go because you're not pulling your weight."
After 5 years of marriage, Brooklyn takes full custody of her sons with minimal resistance from her ex. A year later, she's ready to dip her toes back into the dating pool.
For anyone who's been a single mother, it's an exhausting gig. And I hoped that I would find someone who would come in and be a part of the family and contribute to that. So I signed up for an Australian dating online service.
She met Paul Carter on RSVP, the online dating site. He came across to her as very available. He was single, unmarried, without children, and looking for love.
So the next night I went on my first date with Paul Carter. And that was a date with destiny, to say the least. Paul showed up in a bright yellow sports car, and that epitomised Paul's personality. He was flashy, he was showy. We went out for dinner and we laughed and talked and got on great, and he was just very easy to talk to, and we just kind of clicked. He has a big personality and he is an amusing person to spend time with.
Paul is ambitious and has his sights set on a bright financial future as a real estate developer and independent business owner.
I needed a man that was going to step up, somebody that had the sort of alpha male qualities that my dad had. That's how Paul came across initially. We got romantically involved pretty quickly from that point. I had come from being married to somebody who was really not physically interested in me at all. And here was this guy, he was very sexual and a great lover. And I appealed to him. That made me feel great.
Eventually, Brooklyn introduces her sons to Paul.
My middle son was about 18 months old, and my eldest son was about 4. And he got along great with them, and he was happy to play with them and spend time with them, and so they thought he was great.
For 6 months, the four are spending all of their weekend time together. Eventually, work intervenes, and Paul says he has to focus on some business matters.
He says that he can't see me this weekend. Okay, that's fine, no problem. I thought it was because he was trying to get stuff done. I ended up going to the South Melbourne market, and I'm wandering around the market, and I look up, and here's Paul walking towards me, hand in hand, with a girl that I had no idea who she was. And he couldn't get her to let go of his hand fast enough. And I said to him, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Oh, I'm just showing so-and-so around Melbourne. She's here visiting from Canada." And I couldn't even think at that point. Like, I couldn't think of anything to say. I was left standing there like an idiot, in shock. And when I finally got to ask him about it, his explanation was, "Oh, I was holding her hand because she was scared." She was scared. He claims that she just showed up unannounced. Nobody flies from Canada to Australia on a whim. I'm not somebody that strings people out or plays games, so I wasn't at that time familiar with being played the way that he was playing me. I started to get suspicious. I couldn't understand why I was never invited to his place. So one day when he was in the shower, I pulled his driver's license from his wallet and got his address. His name on his driver's license was Paul Carter, but the address didn't really fit with the narrative that he was putting up about being this super successful guy and having all these designer brands and this flashy car. And I thought, okay, well, I'll go pay a visit and see what's going on at this house. I pull up to the house and I knocked on the door, and this older man, Paul's dad, answered the door. And I said, "Is Paul Carter here?" And he said, "Do you mean Paul Cristallo?" And I said, "No, Paul Carter. This is his address." He said, "Well, Paul Cristallo lives here with his wife, Sonia, and he has 3 kids from his previous marriage." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was surreal. I have 2 little boys who are becoming quite attached to him. And there was a sideboard just inside the door and it had all these photos from their wedding, the pictures of the kids, pictures of his wife. And I felt like the ground was going to open up and swallow me.
Brooklyn Facey is reeling from the news that her new boyfriend, Paul Carter, is not the successful single man he claims to be. In fact, he's married with kids.
This was his second marriage that he was in. At that point, the first marriage, he had 3 kids. And he has a different last name. At this point, I'm starting to wonder if anything about him is real.
Brooklyn decides to confront Paul, who simply shrugs it off.
He says, yes, I'm married, but we're separated and we're just living in the house together. It didn't sound unrealistic. I thought, this guy's got a lot of potential. He was an exciting person. He's not boring like my last husband was. In hindsight, I should have just stuck with boring.
After the painful confrontation, Paul divorces his second wife and moves into an apartment. And soon, the deception is in the rear view as he plays dad to a blended family with Brooklyn.
He had 3 young children. I had 2 young children. Their ages sort of meshed together. Every other weekend, we had all 5 of them. I loved having the kids there. It was a lot of work for sure, but my boys were happy to have playmates. Thought Paul was pretty good with helping with things around the house, and he was involved in everything that they were doing. So we had a pretty good team situation going on. It meant a great deal to me because I was looking for a partner.
In March 2003, 8 months after first meeting Paul, he surprises Brooklyn with a grand gesture.
Paul proposed to me at the beach. He got down on one knee and asked me to marry him. I was thrilled. I was so excited. He convinced me that the life that we were going to have together was going to be wonderful. I didn't really get a sense that my parents didn't like him until I said to them that we were getting married, and they were not in favour of the idea. Right from the get-go, my father thought Paul was sketchy and he couldn't put his finger on it. But, you know, I was an adult. I was in my 30s by that stage, and I was going to do what I was going to do. So we got married on St Kilda Beach in Melbourne. My father came to the wedding. My mother did not come to the wedding. We had all the kids there, all dressed up in black pants and white shirts, and it was so beautiful. And everything seemed so perfect that day. I finally felt like I had the family that I had not had for my whole life. And I was the mother in the family, and I was never going to let my kids feel lonely or sad or unloved. Just thought that was the beginning of the happily ever after. So after we got married, the first couple of years were kind of rough. I was dealing with chronic pain from my car accident, but I felt like Paul had my back. I felt like he was there for me. For the most part, he seemed to be on my team.
The couple doesn't have to worry about money. Brooklyn may be cut out of running the family business, but her dad is still supportive. They move into a bigger house, and when she starts feeling healthier, they take another big step.
We decided to have a child together, and we had Mac, who is the love of my life, and he is my heart and soul.
After Mac's birth, Brooklyn and Paul buy an outdoor equipment company to run as a family business.
I was hoping that it would be something that we could work together in, and then there would be like a legacy for our kids. I was working there part-time, and I was doing the books, and Paul was selling the items, and he was very creative with his marketing, and he would start selling things on eBay. My dad injected a very significant amount of money so we could try and, make a go of it. He was trying to protect me financially, and he wanted to help Paul create something that was going to be good for us.
But after 18 months, they don't have enough cash flow to replenish their stock.
Paul was spending more money than he was bringing in. It wasn't until he was working for something that I was involved in that I got a glimpse of his poor business practices. And my dad basically bailed us out of it. So once we lost the company, my dad then had that over me. And I was going to hear about that forever and a day, that he had saved me and that otherwise we would have been bankrupt. Paul really did a good job of putting a wedge between us.
In 2010, Paul was appointed the CEO of United Housing Victoria, which is a publicly funded community housing company, and there he ran big sort of multi-million-dollar construction jobs.
The organization provides housing for low-income families.
He manages to pull this great job with United Housing, a very secure job, paying very well, and I'm thinking, great, everything's back on track now. I had no idea that he was doing anything wrong at the time.
He was let go after 2 years because they saw they were just hemorrhaging money. The suspicion was that Paul was blowing out the contracts of these construction jobs and pocketing that money.
Brooklyn and Paul have huge mortgage payments for the house they own together, and their debts are mounting because of Paul's excessive spending.
I was panic-stricken, and Paul's way of placating me was to say, I'll just pick up extra jobs on the side. We were in a bad place in our marriage. We ended up having to sell the house. My dad was furious. He was telling me that Paul doesn't know what he's doing. I was humiliated, totally humiliated. The fact that Paul was so irresponsible with money was another reason that my dad felt that he was not a good influence on the boys and that they would be better off with their biological father. He was putting pressure on my ex-husband. My father said to him, I will pay for your lawyers and I will put the kids through school. They took me to court and they filed for custody of my sons.
The custody battle continues for 3 years.
I had run out of money for lawyers. I had no chance of winning. No chance.
Finally, in 2013, Brooklyn loses custody of her 2 oldest sons, who are now 12 and 15. Perhaps influenced by their grandfather, they choose to side with their father.
So my ex-husband, he allowed my father to do this, and he really hasn't worked a day since then. There's only one thing that I really take pride in, and that is that I think I'm a good mum. And for me to lose my kids like that was just so devastating. If it wasn't for Mac, it would have been the end of me.
But for Brooklyn, these losses are just the beginning. Brooklyn Carter is staggering from the heartbreaking loss of her custody battle.
My family, I have no connection with because they've all taken my dad's side. I've lost 2 of my sons, so all I have left is my youngest son and my husband. It would have been easier for me if I had died that day. Everything that I had tried to keep safe and everything that mattered to me had just been handed over to someone else. And I just hope that when my boys are older, they realise that I never, ever stopped loving them. For a long time, I was so focused on the court battle with my kids that I was not paying attention to my husband. He felt that he was missing out on time and energy that I should have been putting into him. He was going to motocross meetings and joining motocross clubs. He was buying cars and changing cars frequently.
Paul would use Brooklyn to subsidise his lifestyle, things like fast cars, properties, credit cards.
There was constant stress in the house. Bills needed to be paid.
Brooklyn has managed to protect a portion of her nest egg from Paul's spending, but she's concerned he might eventually drain all of her money.
I really didn't have a lot of options other than to take back control myself. And my version of that was to take my money and put it somewhere else where Paul couldn't touch it, and I knew it would be safe. So we got an E2 treaty visa, which is granted to Australians who invest into a business in the United States. We had been to Boston to visit, and I loved it there. So I bought a couple of houses and rented them out.
Coincidentally, just as Brooklyn ties up her finances with offshore real estate and her money is out of his reach, Paul comes into a windfall.
On my son Mac's 5th birthday, we were having a party at our house for him, and Paul announced to me that he had inherited a large plot of land from his grandmother, and the government were trying to buy that land because they wanted to put a highway through.
Paul explains that this land is in Italy, and the sale is slightly delayed by red tape.
He showed me some documentation, and it all looked very bona fide to me, which was incredibly exciting because he was telling me that it was worth tens of millions of dollars. And that's one of the things about Paul. He always bounces back, often bigger and better than he was before.
Brooklyn feels hope for the first time since losing custody of her oldest sons. But she's worried how their absence is affecting Mac, her youngest.
It was very difficult for my youngest son to come home every night and not have his brothers there and go to the same school and not see his brothers.
Brooklyn suggests to Paul that they move to Boston.
By this stage, he was working for himself as a builder, and he had various projects underway. He said, okay, great, we'll buy houses, renovate them and flip them and start a new life.
Brooklyn and Mac head to Boston in April of 2014.
I was still devastated about my sons, but it was easier to try and move forward when I wasn't faced with the same things every day that reminded me of them. So Mac and I are in Boston. He was happy, I was happy, and we were expecting that Paul would join us within 2, maybe 3 months. Then suddenly the communication starts to dwindle and he's not calling every day. He didn't contact me for my birthday. It didn't take long for me to question him about what was going on. So he says to me, I would finish these jobs a lot quicker if you can fund them, and then once I finish them, I'll get the final payment and then I'll repay you.
Brooklyn knows that lending money to Paul is a risk, but after 11 years of marriage, she doesn't want to give up on him.
I don't like quitters, and I don't like to quit on things myself. I'm going to stick with something until the very end. So I went ahead and gave him the money.
It won't be long before Brooklyn discovers the real purpose of the money.
It was the middle of the night, and I was woken up by Mac, who was then 8 years old, who had his iPad in his hand. So he hands me his iPad and says, Who is this lady in the picture with Dad? Somebody had sent him a Facebook notification. Hang on, is this an old picture of Paul? This is my husband, but I've got no idea who this woman is. Paul's wearing a black tie suit, and this blonde woman is wearing what looks like a ball gown. I had no idea when the photo was taken, who this woman was, what Paul was doing there, or what the event was. I felt sick. I felt like my whole life was spinning out of control.
Brooklyn Carter is mortified to discover pictures of her husband in the very close company of another woman.
I'm realizing that this is not an old photo from some time before my time with Paul. This is something that's going on now that shouldn't be going on.
It doesn't take long to figure out that the event is an engagement party, and the lady in red is Paul's new fiancée.
Catherine Dubois was a Melbourne woman. She was a bit of a socialite, had great friends, but love was missing, and so she went online to find that. Catherine met Paul on Tinder. Paul rocked up to that date driving a Maserati and claimed he owned a big fleet of them. He claimed to be a self-made millionaire with this big property empire across Melbourne and Queensland.
The courtship begins after Brooklyn leaves for Boston.
Catherine said it was something of a whirlwind romance. He was extremely kind, he paid a lot of attention to her, and came across as extremely committed. She decided to move in with him, and to her shock, he lived in this basic townhouse in Box Hill, which is certainly not where you'd think a multimillionaire lives. Paul had an explanation, and that was that this was a temporary place that he was living while he and his ex-partner had been building this dream home. He actually told her his ex-wife had passed away with brain cancer, so she stopped asking questions. It was about 12 weeks into their love story. Paul got down on one knee and asked Catherine to marry him, and it was an easy yes for her. Catherine owned a beauty bar just outside of Melbourne, and it was to be acquired by the government to make way for a major road project. Catherine said that Paul really convinced her that he was something of an acquisitions expert, and so she was quick to transfer him power of attorney.
With Brooklyn conveniently tucked away in Boston, Paul Carter feels confident that he's safe to openly celebrate his new love. But he fails to consider the massive reach of social media.
After several months of me questioning whether he was having an affair or he was becoming more and more distant, I finally had the proof. So I called him and I said to him, "What the hell is this? What is going on?" He said that he would come over to Boston, and in the meantime we were doing counselling over the phone and trying to figure out if this was at all salvageable.
In Australia, Catherine Dubois receives a very similar shock.
After Catherine and Paul's engagement party, she receives a call from somebody who knows Paul. And they tell her, he has a wife and child in the US. You need to end this. Catherine now believes that he was trying to take over the beauty salon that she'd transferred into his name.
Paul and Catherine break off their relationship, and in November 2014, Paul heads off to Boston and attempts to patch up his relationship with Brooklyn.
He was able to convince me that he was remorseful for what he had done. I'd already been through a divorce and lost my kids. I wasn't going to risk doing that again and losing my youngest son. So I was going to do whatever I had to do to make it work. I still felt like I could pull out the defibrillator once again and restart the heart and try and get things back on track.
On a romantic trip to New York City for Brooklyn's 46th birthday, Paul tells her he wants to renew his commitment to her.
We had a lovely weekend in New York City, and he had organised with a jeweller to look at some diamonds because he was going to get a ring made for me.
But within weeks, it becomes clear she'll never get that diamond ring.
The money hasn't been transferred to the jeweller. No money has come into our accounts. I had faced about as much humiliation as I could take at this point. I was really losing faith in Paul. But I want to be able to say to my kids that I gave it my best shot. I didn't just quit because it got too hard. I just wasn't prepared to lose all that money and then find out a couple of weeks later that he inherited tens of millions of dollars from his grandmother.
Paul has one more gambit to keep Brooklyn happy.
Early 2018, we took over a lease on a horse farm that we were to purchase. We had scheduled the closing to coincide with plenty of time for the money to come from overseas.
Paul spent many years convincing Brooklyn that he was to inherit, and every time this deal was due to close, there was always an excuse as to why it wasn't happening. He would go to extreme lengths to keep up the con. Fake contracts written in Italian would be delivered to her door, and another time that she'd receive calls from a fake number explaining to her why this was being delayed.
With the final payment on the farm looming, Brooklyn puts pressure on Paul for some financial relief. And this turns into his breaking point.
Paul came home and said, there's no inheritance. There isn't any money coming, there's no money. I slid down the fridge and onto the floor like a cartoon character. The whole game was up.
Furious and deeply betrayed, Brooklyn kicks Paul out.
I was now left with this farm that I had to pay for. I enlisted the support of my dad to help figure out the financial part of it until I was able to sell my house and repay him. Fortunately for me, my father made me sign a prenup with Paul, so I didn't end up having to split our assets. Finally, I had control of my life back again from Paul Carter. Or so I thought.
Paul, cut off from his slush fund, is angry and desperate.
Paul shows up to the farm. He was really angry. And he says to me, I'm going to kill myself, but I'm going to make sure I take you down with me. And I just felt chills go down my spine.
Brooklyn Carter is finally coming clean with herself about who her husband really is, and she's terrified.
He was not in control of money, property, our child, nothing. The gravy train had well and truly stopped, and it just enraged him. I went out and bought myself a rifle. My son was sleeping with a baseball bat next to his bed. I was terrified of what might happen.
Brooklyn gets a restraining order, and then finally, after 16 years of marriage, she files for divorce.
I couldn't lose any more money. I couldn't lose any more sleep. I couldn't be any more miserable. I thought, if I don't do something now, I'm not even going to have the energy to get out of this marriage.
In August 2019, the divorce becomes final, and Brooklyn gets full custody of Mac.
I couldn't hold back my emotion, and I burst into tears, and my head fell onto the desk in the courtroom.
But there is just one problem.
I became increasingly concerned about being on the same visa as Paul Carter. I decided I needed to get Mac and I a new visa. My very close friend suggested that we get married because we both had no intentions of ever remarrying in our lives.
Brooklyn and her female friend hold a garden wedding in Albany in September 2019.
She was going to come and live at the house that I had built at my farm, and we were just going to grow old together and help each other out and be companions for each other.
Before the couple can even move in together, Brooklyn's life takes an unforeseen turn.
I get a call from 60 Minutes Australia.
He may look like an ordinary bloke, but this is one of Australia's most cunning con men, a ruthless operator who's fleeced millions from family, friends, the rich and the poor.
60 Minutes seemed to have even more information about things that he had done that I had no clue about.
We gave him the moniker the Casanova con man because his biggest cons were of women he made believe that he loved them.
Paul Carter.
They tracked him down at a job site, which was a very rewarding moment to see because they made him come down off the roof and it was just perfect.
Why would you tell Catherine that your partner had died of bone
Yeah, that
cancer?
was a mistake. I was going through a bad time with my then wife, and it was just a mistake.
They knew about the Uniting Church fiasco and they just had facts and figures and numbers on different projects that he was doing. He hadn't had time to prepare any answers, but he still denied everything.
So I keep hearing this, but I don't know who you're talking about.
He's just deny, 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 deny.
What about the Italian inheritance that didn't exist?
There isn't one.
Was that another mistake?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
After the expose, Paul Carter becomes the subject of a Homeland Security investigation.
He had engaged in these fraud schemes for many years with almost no law enforcement intervention. We were able to determine that he had used multiple identities. At that time, his most recent name is Paul Hamilton. We execute a search warrant at his residence. We found a law diploma under the name of Paul Hamilton. We found a document that was fraudulent from the Department of Homeland Security indicating that he had been awarded United States citizenship. We found military uniforms in his closet. We found a document indicating that he was the beneficiary of over $30 million in trust funds. All of these items were in line with what the underlying allegations were about him. We immediately arrested Paul Carter. So we took him into custody on the felony charges of visa fraud and false statements.
This should have been the end of Brooklyn's nightmare with Paul, except that her marriage to him has put her under the microscope of Homeland Security as well.
A couple of months later, it was about 9:30 or 10 o'clock in the morning, and there's a knock on the door. Brooklyn, we need you to open the door. It's Homeland Security.
The execution of the search warrant at Brooklyn's house was specifically in regard to the allegations of marriage fraud against her.
They're bashing on the door. Open the door, Brooklyn. So I opened the door, and 8 agents in bulletproof vests with guns stormed through my door and up the stairs. They took all our cell phones and computers, took my son's gaming computer, everything that they could get their hands on, and sent it to Quantico to get analysed.
Brooklyn is suspected of committing marriage fraud with her wife in order to gain a green card.
I was not prepared to drag her or her family through the mud with the government. This was supposed to be a happy situation for both of us.
Brooklyn divorces her wife in June 2020.
They never charged me with marriage fraud, but it was enough for them to then look at the ESTA form that I'd filled in and decide, oh, well, that's not right either. There was a felony charge for filling in the ESTA while I was still in the United States.
Brooklyn Carter ultimately pled guilty to making false statements on the ESTA application, which is utilized to re-enter the United States at some point.
Paul Carter also faces his day of reckoning in a federal court, and despite the many allegations, he too is charged with visa fraud on April 7th, 2021, and held in an Albany jail.
Paul Carter was sentenced to time served and a $5,000 fine. We were not, as an agency, pleased with the sentence, but he's now a convicted felon, which in part is based on the work that our agency and our office did.
His deportation hearing has been delayed, and now he has moved to the other side of the country and applied for a green card. So it seems that he's bought himself another couple of years of stalling techniques.
I think based on his history, it's likely that he'll come back around. I'd be surprised if we haven't heard the last of Paul Carter.
Meanwhile, because of Brooklyn's conviction, she must leave the United States. A huge disappointment, but there is a silver lining. A man named Sean Donahue.
I heard that she had to leave the country, and I said, I'm going to marry you, and I'm going to get your son away from Paul. And if he'll have me and you'll allow it, I'm going to adopt him and make him a Donahue.
I can't overstate how wonderful he has been to Mac and I. He's the happy ending that we deserve. I've brought chaos to this man's life and he's still there standing right beside me. And I believe he will be till our dying days.
We're happy as can be now. We are not going to let anybody shatter our marriage. And I'll be with Brooklyn as soon as I can in another country at the soonest available time.
I've been dragged through the gates of hell to get to the happy ending. I've come out the other end. It's going to make a good story for my grandchildren, that's for sure.
This story is a work of fiction. There are places where silence feels older than the trees. Northern Maine was one of them. Long stretches of empty highway disappeared into endless forests. Forgotten logging roads twisted through miles of pine. Small towns settled into routines that rarely change, where everyone recognized every truck, every face, every family name. Secrets did not disappear there. They simply learned how to wait. For 43 years, one question refused to die. What happened to Emily Carter? On the evening of November 3rd, 1981, the 24-year-old elementary school teacher locked the front door of Pine Ridge Elementary, waved goodbye to the school custodian, and climbed into her aging blue station wagon. She was expected at her parents' farmhouse less than 20 minutes away. Dinner was already waiting. Her mother later told investigators the coffee had gone cold before she realized something was terribly wrong. Emily never arrived. The next morning, a local hunter spotted her vehicle abandoned beside an overgrown logging road nearly 15 miles from the route she normally drove home. The driver's door stood open. The headlights were still on, their batteries long dead. Her purse remained on the passenger seat. Her keys rested in the ignition. There were no signs of a collision. No obvious struggle. No blood. No footprints that investigators could confidently identify after an overnight snowfall had covered nearly everything. The scene looked less like a crime and more like someone had simply vanished into the woods. Hundreds of volunteers searched the forest surrounding the logging road. State police brought in tracking dogs. Helicopters circled frozen lakes. Divers searched ponds black beneath thin sheets of early winter ice. Nothing. No body. No clothing. No weapon. No answers. Within weeks, the case became another headline. Young teacher missing. Within months, it became another investigation running out of leads. Within years, it became what detectives feared most. A cold case. The Carter family refused to stop searching. Every Thanksgiving, Emily's father drove the same logging road where her car had been found. Every Christmas, her mother left an empty chair at the dinner table. Every spring, volunteers returned to the woods, hoping melting snow might reveal what winter had hidden. The forest gave them nothing. Time slowly buried the investigation. Witnesses moved away. Evidence aged. Detectives retired. Boxes of reports collected dust in the basement archive of the Somerset County Sheriff's Office. Most people accepted that the truth had disappeared forever. Most people, but not everyone, because someone kept visiting the abandoned logging road. No one noticed at first. An old pickup truck appeared once every few months, parked for less than an hour before disappearing again. Hunters assumed it belonged to another hunter. Loggers assumed it belonged to a surveyor. Nobody paid attention. Until the autumn of 2024, a forestry crew clearing storm-damaged trees discovered fresh shovel marks beneath a cluster of aging white pines less than 200 yards from where Emily's station wagon had been found in 1981. The disturbed soil looked recent, not 40 years old. Recent. The workers believed someone had buried illegal hunting waste. Instead, their shovels struck metal. A rusted military ammunition box. Still locked, still sealed, still hidden beneath layers of earth and roots that had quietly grown around it for decades. Inside lay a collection of objects wrapped carefully in faded oilcloth, a disposable camera, 3 undeveloped rolls of film, a leather notebook, a woman's silver wristwatch stopped forever at 8:17, and a folded envelope. Across the front, written in dark blue ink that had barely faded with time, were 6 words. If they find this, run. The discovery stunned investigators. The box should not have survived. The paper should not have remained readable. Yet everything inside appeared deliberately protected. Someone had buried it. Someone had expected it to stay hidden. Someone had planned for the future. The forgotten cold case exploded back into national attention almost overnight. Reporters flooded Pine Ridge. Satellite trucks lined the courthouse parking lot. Television anchors stood beside the same logging road where Emily Carter's vehicle had been discovered more than 4 decades earlier. One headline appeared everywhere. May 1981 cold case cracked. Buried evidence shocks investigators. Detective Daniel Mercer, assigned to the newly reopened investigation, refused to celebrate. He had spent 26 years working homicide. He knew buried evidence rarely answered every question. Usually it created new ones. The ammunition box was transported directly to the State Forensic Laboratory. Every fingerprint, every fiber, every grain of soil, every page inside the notebook, everything would be examined. Forensic specialists opened the notebook first. The first pages contained ordinary entries, weather observations, shopping lists, short reminders, nothing unusual. Then the handwriting changed. The sentences became shorter, sharper, almost hurried. One page contained only a single line. Someone is watching the road. Several pages later came another. They know I kept copies. Then another. If anything happens, don't trust the first story. Detective Mercer read every page twice. He wasn't looking for dramatic revelations. He was looking for patterns. And one appeared almost immediately. Emily never described fearing a stranger. She repeatedly hinted that the danger came from someone familiar, someone respected, someone people would naturally believe. That realization changed the direction of the investigation before a single suspect had even been identified. Because if Emily had been telling the truth, the greatest mystery surrounding her disappearance was not who had taken her. It was who had convinced an entire town to look in the wrong direction, and buried somewhere beneath 43 years of silence. The answer was still waiting. Detective Daniel Mercer did not believe in coincidences. Not after 26 years working murders. Not after watching ordinary objects become the reason impossible cases were finally solved. People lied. Memories faded. Witnesses died. Evidence did not. It waited. Sometimes beneath dust. Sometimes beneath concrete. Sometimes, as in Emily Carter's case, beneath nearly 3 feet of frozen Maine soil. The notebook remained the center of everyone's attention, but Mercer ignored the headlines already spreading across television screens. Reporters wanted dramatic discoveries. They wanted mysterious messages. They wanted another shocking cold case brought back from the dead. Mercer wanted chronology. He wanted facts. He wanted to know exactly when Emily realized she was in danger. Forensic technicians carefully turned another page. The handwriting had become noticeably different. The neat, rounded letters from the beginning of the journal had disappeared. The words now leaned sharply across the paper. Several sentences ended halfway across the page, as though Emily had looked up suddenly while writing. One entry was dated October 18th, 1981. He asked whether anyone had spoken to me. Nothing else. The next page. October 20th. The truck followed me again. No description. No license plate. Only those 5 words. Another page. October 24th. If they're bluffing, why won't they leave me alone? Mercer looked toward the forensic examiner. Any missing pages? The examiner nodded. 8. Removed. Very carefully. Not torn. Cut. Almost professionally. Someone had taken specific pages without damaging the binding. Someone who wanted the journal to look complete. Mercer hated that detail. It meant whoever handled the notebook understood investigations. Ordinary people rip pages. Someone experienced removed them cleanly. The notebook continued. November 1st. I finally know where they buried it. Mercer stopped reading. The room became silent. Buried what? Nobody knew. There was no explanation, no location, no description. Only another unfinished thought disappearing into blank paper. The following page contained the last complete entry. November 2nd. Tomorrow night changes everything. Then, nothing. Emily disappeared the following evening. Mercer closed a notebook. He had investigated enough murders to recognize one unmistakable fact. Emily wasn't writing random fears. She was documenting discoveries. Each entry represented another step towards something she had uncovered, something someone desperately wanted hidden. Meanwhile, another team examined the disposable camera found inside the ammunition box. The film inside had never been developed. Technicians worked slowly. 43 years had nearly destroyed the negatives. Every mistake would erase the images forever. Hours passed. Then the first photograph appeared on a laboratory screen. A dirt road. Trees. Nothing unusual. The second, an abandoned logging shed. Again, nothing obvious. The third photograph changed everything. Mercer stared without speaking. A black pickup truck, parked beside the old logging shed. The photograph was grainy, taken from a distance, but investigators could still make out one important detail. The company logo painted on the driver's door. Northridge Timber Company. Mercer immediately requested business records from 1981. The company no longer existed. It had dissolved in the early 1990s, but ownership records remained. The president of Northridge Timber had been a man named Harold Whitaker, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the county during the early 80s. Respected, influential, a generous donor to schools, churches, police charities. Exactly the type of person nobody suspected. Mercer disliked reputations. They blinded investigations. Another photograph finished developing. The same pickup, different angle. Someone standing beside it. The image was too damaged to identify the face. Only a silhouette. Tall, broad shoulders, wearing what appeared to be a heavy logging jacket. Then came photograph number 5. Mercer leaned closer. Emily had photographed a freshly dug section of earth behind the abandoned logging shed. The soil looked disturbed, fresh, almost as though something large had recently been buried. Mercer remembered the journal. I finally know where they buried it. His pulse quickened. Was this the place she meant? The 6th photograph answered nothing. Only tire tracks leading away from the clearing. The 7th showed another vehicle, a county sheriff's cruiser. Mercer frowned. That shouldn't have been there. According to official reports from 1981, deputies never searched that location until almost 3 weeks after Emily disappeared. Yet her photograph clearly showed a patrol vehicle parked there before she vanished. Someone had been there earlier. Someone whose presence never appeared in the case file. Mercer immediately requested every patrol log from November 1981. Most had been destroyed years earlier under routine document retention policies. Only photocopies remained. Incomplete. Several pages were missing. Again, missing. The pattern repeated itself. Missing reports. Missing journal pages. Missing evidence. Missing truth. A young forensic analyst entered carrying another folder. We finished the envelope. Mercer looked up. Fingerprints. None. DNA? The seal wasn't licked. Mercer wasn't surprised. Whoever buried the ammunition box planned carefully. Too carefully. What about the handwriting? The analyst opened the report. We compared it to Emily's journal. And it isn't hers. Mercer stared. So somebody else wrote, if they find this, run. Yes. The room fell silent. That meant Emily hadn't prepared the evidence box. Someone else had. Someone who knew investigators would eventually discover it. Someone protecting evidence instead of destroying it. But why wait 43 years? Unless they hadn't intended to wait. Maybe they had planned to retrieve it. Maybe they died first. Maybe they disappeared too. Mercer's thoughts were interrupted by another call. A retired deputy wanted to speak. Privately, his name was Walter Briggs, 78 years old, one of the first officers who responded when Emily's station wagon was discovered. Briggs refused to discuss the case over phone. "There are things I never put in my report," he said quietly. Mercer asked why. The old deputy hesitated, then answered with a sentence that sent a chill through everyone listening. "Because the report they filed wasn't the one I wrote." Mercer grabbed his coat. Within 20 minutes, he was driving north through snow-covered roads toward Briggs' isolated cabin overlooking Moosehead Lake. The retired deputy opened the door before Mercer reached the porch. His face looked exhausted, not from age, from memory. Inside the cabin, Briggs walked directly to an old wooden desk. Without speaking, he unlocked the bottom drawer. He removed a weathered manila folder wrapped in yellowed newspaper. "I kept this," he whispered. Mercer slowly opened it. Inside lay handwritten notes, original sketches from the crime scene, Polaroid photographs, and a patrol report signed by Walter Briggs. A report Mercer had never seen, because it had never entered evidence. Mercer's eyes stopped on one sentence highlighted in pencil. "Victim's vehicle not first vehicle on scene." He looked up immediately. "What does this mean?" Briggs took a slow breath. "When we arrived, Emily's station wagon was already there." Mercer frowned. "That's what the official report says." The old deputy slowly shook his head. "No." He pointed to a photograph. There was another vehicle. Mercer examined the image. Almost hidden beyond the trees, barely visible through falling snow, a dark-colored sedan sat less than 50 yards behind Emily's abandoned car. No license plate visible. No driver. Nothing. Briggs continued. "It was gone before sunrise." "Who moved it?" "I don't know." "You didn't report it?" "I did." He tapped the folder. This was my report. Mercer felt the weight of the moment settle over the room. Someone had rewritten history before the investigation had even begun, and if the first official report had been altered, how many other truths had disappeared with it? Mercer read the original patrol report 3 times. Each time, the same sentence demanded his attention. "Victim's vehicle not first vehicle on scene." The official report stored inside the county archive contained no such statement. No mention of a second automobile. No mention of altered tire tracks. No mention of footprints leading away from the road before officers established the perimeter. Someone had not simply made a mistake. Someone had rewritten the beginning of the investigation. Detective Mercer slowly looked up at Walter Briggs. "Who took your report?" The old deputy stared into the fireplace for several seconds before answering. "Sheriff Howard Lawson." The name still carried weight in northern Maine. Lawson had died almost 20 years earlier. His funeral filled the largest church in the county. Politicians attended. Judges attended. State police commanders attended. People remembered him as an honest lawman who dedicated his life to protecting the community. Mercer had heard stories about him since joining the department. Most were filled with admiration. Briggs didn't look impressed. "He told me I'd made a mistake." "You disagreed?" "I knew what I saw." Mercer placed the report back on the table. "What happened next?" "The next morning he called me into his office." Briggs paused. He already had another report typed. Mercer remained silent. "He told me to sign it." "Did you?" "I refused." Another pause. Then he reminded me I had 3 children, a mortgage, and exactly 8 years left until retirement. Mercer understood. The pressure didn't have to be violent. It only had to be effective. Briggs finally signed a replacement report. The original never entered evidence. Instead, he kept it hidden for 43 years. "I told myself I'd hand it over someday," Briggs whispered. "I just kept waiting for the right detective." Mercer nodded quietly. "I hope I'm not too late." Briggs didn't answer. He simply reached into another drawer. There was something else. He removed a small evidence envelope, yellowed with age, still sealed. Inside rested a brass button, old, worn, with traces of dried reddish-brown staining around one edge. Mercer frowned. Where did this come from? 30 feet from Emily's car. It isn't in evidence. It was... Briggs smiled sadly. Until it wasn't. The button had been collected during the initial search. Lawson later claimed it belonged to one of the volunteer searchers. Case closed. Evidence discarded. Briggs never believed him. Neither did Mercer. The button was immediately transported to the State Forensic Laboratory. Modern DNA technology had solved cases with less, much less. While the laboratory processed forgotten evidence, Mercer continued digging into every surviving document connected to November 1981. Patterns slowly emerged. Witness statements disappeared. Evidence logs contained unexplained gaps. Several interview recordings listed in old inventories no longer existed. Even stranger, 3 detectives originally assigned to Emily's disappearance had all requested transfers within 6 months. 2 left law enforcement entirely. 1 died in a suspicious single-vehicle accident less than a year after the investigation stalled. Coincidence? Maybe. Mercer had learned never to ignore coincidence, especially when it appeared repeatedly. He visited the widow of Detective Samuel Price. She welcomed him politely. When Mercer mentioned Emily Carter, her expression changed almost instantly. You reopened it? We did. She looked toward an old bookshelf. My husband never believed it was over. She disappeared into another room. Moments later, she returned carrying a cardboard box covered in dust. He kept these. Inside were dozens of handwritten notes, maps, copies of interviews, photographs. Unlike the official case file, Price's personal notes contained observations, opinions, questions. Mercer immediately noticed one sentence written across the top of a yellow legal pad. Stop looking at the woods. Look at the people. Another page listed 6 names. Harold Whitaker, Sheriff Howard Lawson, Town Council Member Edward Collins, County Surveyor Michael Crane, Business Attorney Robert Ellis, and one final name circled twice. Nathan Hade. Mercer searched the official case file. Nathan Hale appeared only once. Interviewed on November 8, 1981. Occupation. Mechanic. Statement. No useful information. 1 page. Less than 4 minutes. That was all. Mercer disliked interviews that short, especially in major investigations. People almost never reveal everything in 4 minutes. He located Hale's last known address. The house still stood, weathered, small, hidden among dense pine trees several miles outside town. An elderly woman answered the door. Nathan? She smiled sadly. My husband passed away 8 years ago. Mercer apologized. Before leaving, he asked one final question. Did he ever mention Emily Carter? The woman's expression froze. She opened the screen door wider. You'd better come inside. The living room felt untouched by time. Old family photographs covered the walls. A grandfather clock ticked quietly in the corner. She poured 2 cups of coffee before speaking. My husband wanted to tell the police. What stopped him? He was terrified. Of who? She hesitated. Not who. Mercer waited. What? She stood and walked toward a cabinet. From behind several photo albums, she removed a cassette tape, still inside its plastic case. Nathan's handwriting covered the label. If anything happens to me. Mercer's heartbeat quickened. When did he record this? Winter of 1982. Did anyone else hear it? She shook her head. He made me promise. Mercer carefully placed the cassette into an evidence bag. Promise what? That if the Carter case was ever reopened. She swallowed hard. I'd finally give this to someone who still cared. Hours later, forensic technicians restored the aging tape. Static filled the speakers. A chair scraped across the floor. Then a man's nervous voice emerged. My name is Nathan Hale. Long pause. If you're hearing this. Another pause. I'm probably dead. The room remained silent. Nathan continued speaking. I fixed trucks for Northridge Timber. Mercer exchanged glances with the forensic examiner. Northridge again. Nathan described servicing company vehicles during the autumn of 1981. Then he reached the night that changed everything. November 3rd. Heavy breathing. A black pickup came in around midnight. Mercer leaned closer. The front bumper was damaged. Pause. There was blood. Nobody moved. Nathan's voice trembled. They told me it hit a deer. Another pause. It wasn't deer blood. Mercer looked toward the audio technician. Every person in the room understood the same thing. Nathan kept talking. I cleaned it. Silence. They paid me to clean it. Long silence. I wish I hadn't. Then came the sentence that froze the room. I wasn't the first person they asked. The recording ended abruptly. No explanation. No names. Only another mystery. Mercer slowly removed his headphones. If Nathan Hale was telling the truth, there were others. Others who knew. Others who helped. Others who had remained silent for more than 4 decades. Outside the laboratory, snow began falling again. The same quiet snowfall that had buried Emily Carter's last known footsteps in 1981. Only this time, the snow was no longer hiding the truth. It was watching the truth come back to life. The recording from Nathan Hale changed the investigation overnight. For 43 years, the disappearance of Emily Carter had been treated as a mystery without direction, a missing woman, an abandoned vehicle, a frozen trail of unanswered questions. But now investigators had something they never had before. A witness who admitted he had touched the evidence. A witness who admitted someone paid him to erase the truth. And a witness who was terrified enough to record his confession before anyone could stop him. The first priority was identifying every person connected to Nathan Hale's statement. The name that appeared again and again was Northridge Timber Company, a company that no longer existed, a company whose records have been scattered across decades of mergers, bankruptcies, and forgotten archives. But companies leave behind footprints, bank accounts, property records, employees, and secrets. Detective Mercer spent the next several days rebuilding Northridge Timber from the ground up. What he found disturbed him. The company was not just a logging operation. It controlled hundreds of thousands of acres across northern Maine. It owned private roads, private buildings, private security operations, and most importantly, it had relationships with local officials. The same officials who controlled the investigation into Emily Carter's disappearance. The same people who decided which evidence mattered and which evidence disappeared. One name stood above all others. Harold Whitaker, the founder of Northridge Timber. In 1981, Whitaker was one of the most powerful men in the county. He owned multiple businesses. He donated money to schools. He sponsored community events. His photograph appeared in newspapers beside politicians and police officers. He was not a man people suspected. He was a man people defended. Mercer requested an interview with Whitaker. The answer came quickly. Denied. Whitaker had died in 2007, but his family still controlled parts of the company empire. His son, Andrew Whitaker, now managed the remaining properties. When investigators contacted him, he gave a short statement. He said his father had nothing to do with Emily Carter's disappearance. He called the accusations a desperate attempt to revive an old tragedy. But Mercer noticed something. Andrew Whitaker never asked what evidence they had. He never asked why the case reopened. He only asked one question. Who found the box? That question bothered Mercer, because innocent people usually ask what happened. Guilty people often ask what investigators know. The ammunition box discovery had not been made public in detail. The contents had not been released. Only a few people knew about the notebook, the camera, the hidden message. So how did Andrew Whitaker know investigators found something? Mercer immediately reviewed the press release. A mistake had been made. One sentence mentioned buried evidence. That was enough, but it still raised another question. Why did that phrase affect him? The investigation moved toward the Whitaker family. Search warrants were issued for several old Northridge properties. The first location was an abandoned company office hidden deep in the forest. The building had been empty for more than 20 years. Inside were old filing cabinets. employee records, financial documents. Most were damaged, some were destroyed, but one cabinet remained locked. Inside were employee photographs from 1981. Mercer examined each face. Most were ordinary workers, truck drivers, mechanics, foremen. Then he found Nathan Hale, standing beside a company vehicle. Next to him was another employee, a man Mercer recognized, Walter Briggs, the retired deputy. Mercer stared at the photograph. Why was a sheriff's deputy standing with Northridge employees? Briggs had never mentioned working with the company. The connection changed the investigation. Mercer returned to Briggs' cabin. The old deputy knew immediately why he had come. I was waiting for this conversation. Mercer placed the photograph on the table. Why didn't you tell me? Briggs looked down. Because I wasn't proud of it. He explained that before becoming deputy, he had worked part-time security for Northridge Timber. Only on weekends. Only for extra money. At least, that was what he originally told himself. Mercer asked the obvious question. Did you know Harold Whitaker? Briggs nodded. Everyone knew Harold. Did you protect him? The old man remained silent. That silence answered enough. Finally, Briggs spoke. I protected the company. The words were heavy, not a confession, but close. He explained that Northridge controlled the town. Jobs, money, politics. People depended on them. Speaking against them meant losing everything. But Mercer wasn't interested in excuses. He wanted facts. What happened the night Emily disappeared? Briggs closed his eyes. I don't know everything. Then tell me what you know. The retired deputy took a deep breath. I know Emily wasn't supposed to find what she found. Mercer leaned forward. What did she find? Briggs looked toward the window. The old quarry. The room became silent. Northridge owned an abandoned quarry several miles from the logging road, a place that had been closed since 1979, a place nobody visited, a place not mentioned anywhere in the official investigation. Mercer immediately checked the original search records. The quarry was never searched. Not once. A massive area connected to Northridge Timber. Never searched. Why? Because the official explanation was that there was no reason to look there. But now, there was a reason. The investigation team arrived at the abandoned quarry before sunrise. Fog covered the area. The old machinery remained where workers had left it decades earlier. Rusting, silent, forgotten. Search crews moved carefully through the property. They checked abandoned buildings, storage rooms, underground areas. Then a technician discovered something strange. A section of ground near the old equipment shed had a different soil pattern, recently disturbed, just like the location where the ammunition box was found. The team began excavating. Hours passed. The discovery shocked everyone. Not human remains. Not yet. A hidden metal container, similar to the first, but smaller. Inside was something investigators never expected. A collection of photographs. Dozens of them. All taken in 1981, all connected to Emily Carter. The first images showed Emily leaving Pine Ridge Elementary. The second showed her arriving at the logging road. The third showed someone following her. A dark sedan. The same vehicle from Walter Briggs' forgotten report. The photographs prove one terrifying fact. Emily was being watched before she disappeared. Someone had been tracking her movements. Someone had planned everything. But the final photograph was the one that stopped investigators completely. It showed Emily standing beside a man, not a stranger, not an unknown suspect. Someone she knew, someone she trusted. Written on the back of the photograph were 5 words. She finally knows the truth. Mercer stared at the image, because the person standing beside Emily was not Harold Whitaker, not Andrew Whitaker, not Nathan Hale. It was someone whose name had appeared in the investigation from the beginning, someone who had helped search for Emily, someone who had promised the Carter family he would never stop looking. The person was Sheriff Howard Lawson, the man who rewrote the original report, the man who removed the evidence, the man who made sure the investigation went in the wrong direction. And suddenly, investigators understood the horrifying possibility. Emily Carter wasn't just taken by someone powerful. She was taken by someone who had the authority to make her disappear. And for 43 years, that person had been hiding behind the badge. The photograph changed everything. For decades, Sheriff Howard Lawson had been remembered as the man who led the search for Emily Carter, the man who stood beside her parents during press conferences, the man who promised the community that every possible resource would be used to bring her home. Now investigators were looking at the same face through a completely different lens, not as the person searching for answers, but as someone who may have been hiding them. The image was examined repeatedly. The forensic team enhanced the contrast, improved the resolution, analyzed the age of the photograph. There was no mistake. The man standing beside Emily Carter on the night before her disappearance was Howard Lawson, the sheriff, the person who controlled the investigation, the person who controlled the evidence, the person who decided where investigators searched, and the person who had removed the original report from Walter Briggs. Detective Mercer knew what this meant. The case had moved beyond negligence, beyond mistakes, beyond incompetence. If Lawson had intentionally hidden evidence, then the entire investigation had been compromised from the beginning. But there was one problem. Howard Lawson was dead. No arrest, no interrogation, no courtroom confrontation, only the evidence he left behind. Mercer returned the old case files with a new question. Not, who took Emily? But, what was Lawson protecting? Because powerful people rarely destroy evidence for no reason. They protect something, or someone. The team began rebuilding Lawson's final years as sheriff. They discovered something unusual. In 1981, Lawson had recently purchased a large property outside town. The official records showed it was a simple retirement investment, but the financial documents told another story. The land had been purchased through a private company connected to North Ridge Timber. The payment came from an account that investigators could not previously trace. A hidden financial connection. A sheriff receiving money from the company connected to the disappearance. The same company owned by Harold Whitaker. The same company whose truck appeared in Emily's photographs. The same company Nathan Hale said he helped cover up evidence for. The pieces were beginning to connect. But Mercer knew something was missing. Motive. Why Emily? Why would a respected teacher become a target? The answer came from the recovered photographs. The images from the second container were analyzed one by one. Most showed Emily investigating, taking notes, following locations, meeting people. But one photograph stood apart. It showed a document spread across a table. Only part of the page was visible, but one phrase could be read clearly. Property transfer agreement. Emily had not discovered a random secret. She had discovered something involving land. Investigators returned to Emily's journal. The missing pages suddenly became more important. Those pages were likely the explanation. The pages someone removed. The pages someone feared. A new search focused on finding the missing pieces. The original journal had been stored in evidence for years. If someone had removed pages, they may have hidden them somewhere nearby. Investigators reviewed every person who had access to the evidence room in 1981. The list was short. Only 6 people. 4 were retired. 1 had moved out of state. 1 was dead. The final name stopped Mercer. Evidence clerk. Thomas Reed. At the time of Emily's disappearance, Reed was 28 years old. His job was simple. Catalog evidence. Maintain records. Store case materials. But when investigators reviewed his history, they discovered something strange. 3 months after Emily's case went cold, Reed resigned. No explanation. No forgued. He disappeared from law enforcement records. Mercer found him living under a different name in another state. When contacted, Reed refused an interview. That refusal lasted 12 hours. Then he called back. I've been waiting for this day. Mercer traveled across the country to meet him. Thomas Reed was 70 years old now. Older, tired, but his memory was sharp. He invited Mercer inside. The first thing he said was, Howard Lawson was afraid. Mercer asked, of what? Reed looked directly at him. Of Emily Carter. The old evidence clerk explained that Emily had visited the sheriff's office 2 weeks before she disappeared. She brought documents. She brought photographs. She brought names. But Lawson convinced her to wait. He told her he would investigate privately. He told her she should trust him. And Emily made one mistake. She believed him. What did she find? Mercer asked. Reed hesitated, then walked toward an old filing cabinet. He removed a small envelope. I kept this because I knew someone would eventually ask. Inside were photocopies, not the original missing pages. Copies. Reed explained that before the journal disappeared from evidence, he secretly copied the pages. He didn't know why. He just felt something was wrong. The first page described Emily's discovery. She had found records showing North Ridge Timber was illegally taking land from local families. But the second page revealed something much worse. She discovered that several property owners who refused to sell had suddenly changed their minds. Not because they wanted to, because they had been threatened. The third page contained a list of names. People involved, business leaders, officials, law enforcement, and at the bottom, Howard Lawson, the sheriff. Reed continued. Emily found out Lawson wasn't investigating crime. Mercer stared at the documents. What was he doing? Reed answered quietly. He was managing it. The room went silent, because the implication was enormous. Emily Carter was not just a witness. She was a threat. She had uncovered a network of people who depended on silence. And Sheriff Lawson was not protecting the town. He was protecting the system. But there was still one question. If Lawson was involved, why was Emily's body never found? Where did she go? What happened after the photograph was taken? The answer came from an unexpected discovery. A location hidden in one of Emily's final journal entries. A place she mentioned only once. A place investigators had overlooked for 43 years. A place connected to Northridge Timber. A place even Lawson could not erase completely. The old winter road. The abandoned mill. The forgotten section of forest known locally as Black Pine Ridge. And when investigators entered that area for the first time, they found something that had been waiting there since 1981. Something that would finally reveal what happened on the night Emily Carter disappeared. Black Pine Ridge had been forgotten for decades. Not officially, not on maps, but in the minds of the people who lived near it. The abandoned forest road sat beyond the last maintained highway, hidden behind thick walls of pine trees and years of overgrowth. Locals rarely went there. Hunters avoided parts of it. Older residents simply called it the place where nothing good happened. For 43 years, nobody had searched it properly, not because it was impossible, because nobody had a reason. Until now, Detective Daniel Mercer stood at the edge of the old winter road, holding Emily Carter's recovered journal. One sentence had brought them there, a sentence written only days before she vanished. The place where the trees stopped growing is where they hid the truth. At the time, investigators in 1981 believed it was meaningless. A frightened woman writing strange thoughts. A person under stress imagining danger everywhere. But now Mercer saw it differently. Emily was not writing fears. She was leaving directions. The search team moved slowly through Black Pine Ridge. The ground was frozen. The air was silent. Every footstep disappeared beneath the thick layer of snow. Modern equipment scanned beneath the surface. Ground-penetrating radar, thermal imaging, digital mapping. Technology that did not exist when Emily disappeared. Technology that could finally reveal what decades of traditional searches missed. After several hours, a technician stopped. Detective Mercer walked over. The screen showed something unusual. A large underground shape. Not natural, not geological. Something placed there. The team marked the location. Everyone expected the worst. A burial site. A final answer. But when they dug down, they found something completely different. A concrete structure. A hidden underground room. A forgotten storage chamber built beneath the old North Ridge timber property. The door was rusted shut. But it had one detail that immediately caught Mercer's attention: a symbol carved into the metal. The same symbol appeared on documents recovered from Emily's notebook. The same symbol connected to the private land agreements. The same symbol linked to Harold Whitaker. Investigators opened the chamber. Inside was not a grave. It was an archive. Hundreds of files, maps, contracts, photographs, personal records. A hidden history of Northridge Timber. The company had not simply bought land. It had manipulated entire communities. Families were pressured. Property values were altered. Documents were forged. And every time someone threatened to expose the operation, the problem was quietly removed. Mercer spent hours reviewing the files. Then he found something that stopped him. Emily Carter. Inside were copies of everything she had discovered. Her photographs, her notes, her investigation. Someone had been monitoring her, following her, recording her movements. They knew what she knew before anyone else did. But one document inside the folder was different. A handwritten statement. Not from Emily, from Howard Lawson, the sheriff, the man who had controlled the investigation. The statement was dated November 4th, 1981. One day after Emily disappeared. Mercer read the first line. The situation has been contained. His expression changed. The statement continued. The girl will not be able to expose what she found. The room became silent. For 43 years, investigators believed Emily's disappearance was a mystery. Now, they had evidence suggesting someone planned it. But the document revealed something even more disturbing. Lawson was not writing alone. Several sections contained initials besides specific decisions. Names. People involved. People who helped. The final page contained only one sentence. Whitaker wants a problem solved before winter. Mercer stared at the words. Harold Whitaker, the businessman, the respected community leader, the man whose company stood behind everything. The investigation now had a clearer picture. Emily had uncovered corruption. Lawson had protected it. Whitaker had financed it. But there was still a missing piece. What happened to Emily after she entered Black Pine Ridge? The answer came from another file, a surveillance report, a report nobody knew existed. It contained observations from a private investigator hired by Northridge Timber. The investigator had followed Emily during her final week. The report described her movements, who she met, where she went. But the final entry was the most important. November 3rd, 1981, 10:42 p.m. Subject arrives at Black Pine Ridge with Sheriff Lawson. Mercer froze. The photograph already suggested Emily knew Lawson. The files confirmed they met. But why? Why would Emily willingly go with a man she later feared? The answer appeared in the next line. Subject believes Sheriff Lawson is helping her. Mercer closed his eyes, because that was the tragedy of the entire case. Emily did not walk into danger. She walked toward someone she trusted, someone who would convince her he was on her side, someone who knew exactly how to get close enough to stop her. The search continued through the underground archive. More documents appeared, more names, more connections. But one item was missing. The final report from the night Emily disappeared. The document describing what happened after she arrived at Black Pine Ridge. It should have been there. It was not. Someone had removed it. Again, the pattern continued. Every time investigators reached the final answer, the last piece disappeared. But this time, Mercer had something different. A clue hidden inside another document. A handwritten note from one of the Northridge employees. A name, a location, and a sentence that changed the direction of the investigation. If you want Emily's truth, find Nathan Hale's second confession. Mercer immediately returned to Nathan Hale's records, because a mechanic had already confessed once. But apparently, there was another confession, one that nobody had ever heard. The search for Nathan Hale's second recording led investigators to an unexpected place. A hidden compartment inside his old workshop. Inside was a small cassette tape. No label, no date, only 3 words written across it. I saw everything. When the tape began playing, the voice was weak, older, broken, but unmistakable. Nathan Hale, I lied before. A pause. I told them I only cleaned the truck. Heavy breathing. I didn't tell them what happened afterward. The investigators leaned closer, because Nathan was finally revealing what happened after Emily Carter disappeared. The truth he carried for 43 years. And the first sentence from the recording would change the entire case. Emily Carter was alive when they took her away. Emily Carter was alive when they took her away. Nobody spoke. For several seconds, the only sound was a quiet hum of the recording equipment. 43 years. For decades of uncertainty. For decades of people believing Emily disappeared into the darkness of the Maine wilderness. But Nathan Hale's second confession revealed something far more disturbing. Emily had not vanished. She had been moved. Someone had controlled the story from the beginning. Detective Mercer listened to the recording again. Every word mattered. Every pause. Every breath. Nathan sounded older than the man in the first confession. His voice carried guilt. The kind of guilt that survives longer than fear. I should have talked sooner. A long silence. But every person who tried to tell the truth ended up losing something. The tape continued. Nathan explained what happened after he cleaned the damaged truck. The truck belonging to Northridge Timber. The truck with blood on the bumper. The truck connected to the night Emily disappeared. He said the vehicle arrived at the workshop around midnight. Not driven by a random employee. Driven by Sheriff Howard Lawson. That detail alone changed everything. Because Lawson had spent years claiming he arrived at the scene after Emily's car was discovered. But Nathan's recording placed him somewhere else, at the center of the event. Nathan described Lawson stepping out of the vehicle. Calm, controlled, not surprised, not confused, like someone following a plan. Then Nathan heard another vehicle approaching, the same dark sedan captured in the photographs. A vehicle investigators now believe belonged to Harold Whitaker. Nathan never saw who was inside, but he saw Lawson's reaction. He looked nervous. Those 3 words stood out, because Howard Lawson was not a man who appeared nervous easily. He was a sheriff, the person everyone depended on, the person who controlled the town. But that night, he was afraid. Nathan continued. He said Emily was sitting inside the truck, alive, awake, but not injured. She was angry. She was arguing. She kept asking Lawson one question. How could you do this? The question haunted investigators because it suggested Emily already knew. She knew Lawson was involved. She knew the person she trusted had betrayed her. Nathan said he heard Emily mention the documents, the land records, the names, the evidence she collected. Then he heard Lawson say something that investigators had never seen in any report. Nobody was supposed to get hurt. A sentence that revealed something important. This was not supposed to end with Emily disappearing. At least, not at first. Something changed that night. Something went wrong. Nathan described the argument becoming louder. Emily demanded to leave. She threatened to go directly to state police. She threatened to release everything. Then another voice appeared. A voice Nathan recognized. Harold Whitaker, the owner of Northridge Timber. The man who had stayed hidden behind his reputation for decades. Whitaker did not sound angry. He sounded disappointed, like Emily had betrayed him, like she had broken some unwritten family rule. Nathan remembered one sentence clearly. You don't understand what this would destroy. Emily responded, No, you don't understand what you destroyed already. Then the recording became unclear. A struggle, footsteps, a vehicle door. Then silence. Nathan said he saw Emily being taken away from the workshop, but he did not know where. He said he wanted to follow. He wanted to help. But then he saw Lawson, standing beside the truck, looking directly at him. And Nathan understood. He was not a witness. He was a warning. The tape ended. Mercer removed the cassette. The investigation now had a timeline. Emily left the school. She met Lawson. She was taken to Black Pine Ridge. She survived that encounter. Then she was moved. But where? That question became the center of the reopened investigation. Search teams expanded beyond the original locations. Every North Ridge property was examined. Every abandoned building, every private road, every hidden structure. The old company network stretched across thousands of acres. Finding Emily meant finding one specific place among a massive wilderness. Then came another breakthrough. The DNA results from the brass button. The button found near Emily's vehicle. The button that had disappeared from evidence. The button that Walter Briggs secretly preserved. The laboratory report arrived early one morning. The results were unexpected. The DNA did not belong to Emily. It did not belong to Nathan. It did not belong to Lawson. The sample belonged to another person, a man who had never appeared in the original investigation, a man named Peter Voss, a former North Ridge Timber Security officer, someone who had left Maine shortly after Emily disappeared, someone who had changed his identity, someone who had spent 40 years avoiding attention. Investigators tracked him down in another state. At first, Voss refused to speak. But when Mercer placed a photograph from 1981 on the table, everything changed. Voss looked at the image for a long time. Then he whispered, "She was never supposed to find a room." Mercer leaned forward. "What room?" Voss looked terrified. "The underground records room." The same hidden chamber investigators had discovered. The same place containing North Ridge's secrets. But Voss revealed something investigators did not know. There was another chamber, a second location, a place beneath the original archive, a place used for meetings, for private conversations, for controlling problems. Mercer asked a question everyone wanted answered. Was Emily there? Voss looked away. Yes. The room became silent. What happened to her? Voss closed his eyes. I don't know. Mercer knew immediately he was lying. Not completely, but enough. Voss knew something. Something he had hidden for decades. The interview continued for 6 hours. Slowly, pieces began falling into place. Voss admitted he worked security for North Ridge. He admitted he followed Emily. He admitted he helped Lawson monitor her movements. But he insisted he never harmed her. I thought they were just going to scare her. Mercer stared at him. Who? Voss swallowed. Everyone. That answer revealed the most terrifying part of the case. Emily Carter's disappearance was not caused by one person. It was protected by many. People who made small choices, small compromises, small decisions, until those choices created something impossible to escape. Before leaving the interview room, Voss handed Mercer a final piece of evidence. A map, old, folded, marked with handwritten notes. One location circled in red, a place deep inside Black Pine Ridge. Voss looked at Mercer. That is where they took her after the meeting. Mercer studied the map. The location was not a building, not a road, not a property. It was an abandoned mining tunnel, a place officially closed in 1976, a place nobody had entered for nearly 50 years. The search began the next morning. And when investigators entered the darkness beneath Black Pine Ridge, they found something waiting inside. Something that proved Emily Carter had been there. Something that revealed the final hours of her life. And something that showed the cold case was never really cold. The truth had been buried, but it had never disappeared. The abandoned mining tunnel beneath Black Pine Ridge had been sealed for nearly half a century. The entrance was hidden behind a collapsed section of rock and thick vegetation. No official maps showed it as an active location. No maintenance records existed after 1976. According to every public document, the tunnel had been forgotten, but someone knew it was there. Someone had used it, and someone had desperately tried to make sure nobody ever found it. Detective Daniel Mercer stood at the entrance wearing protective gear, staring into the darkness ahead. The air coming from inside was cold. Not winter cold. Something different. The kind of cold that comes from places untouched by sunlight. Behind him, investigators prepared equipment. Lights, cameras, scanning devices. Every person there understood what they were walking into. This was no longer a search for evidence. This was a search for the truth. The first team entered slowly. Their footsteps echoed through the narrow tunnel. The walls were covered with decades of moisture. Old mining tools remained where workers had abandoned them. Rusting equipment, broken wooden supports. A forgotten piece of Maine history. But after walking nearly half a mile underground, something changed. The tunnel became different. The walls were reinforced. The floor was cleaner. Someone had maintained this section long after the mine closed. Mercer stopped. Someone was here. The team continued forward. Then they found the door. A heavy steel door built into the rock. No markings, no sign, no official record. Just a lock that had been replaced several times. Investigators removed it carefully. Inside was a room. Not a mine room. An office. A hidden office. A desk. Filing cabinets. A telephone. A wall covered with photographs. And in the center of the room, a chair. The chair faced a wall of photographs. The photographs were of people, local residents, business owners, government officials, and at the center, Emily Carter. The investigators stood silently. This was not a hiding place. It was a surveillance room, a place where someone watched people, tracked people, controlled information. The wall revealed the scale of North Ridge Timber's operation. Emily was not the first person monitored. She was just the person who got too close. Behind one photograph was a handwritten note, potential problem. Behind another, possible cooperation. Behind another, monitor communication. Mercer photographed everything, every note, every name, every detail. Then he opened the desk drawer. Inside was a tape recorder, a stack of cassette tapes, each labeled with dates. The surveillance continued long after Emily disappeared. Someone had been recording conversations, collecting information, keeping leverage over anyone who could threaten the company. Mercer picked up the tape labeled, November 3rd, 1981, Emily Carter. Nobody moved. The tape was decades old. The plastic case was cracked, but the label remained clear. The forensic team carefully transported it back to the laboratory. Hours later, they played it. At first, only static. Then footsteps. A door opening. A man's voice. Howard Lawson. Emily, you need to understand what you're dealing with. Her voice answered. I understand perfectly. She sounded tired, but not afraid. You think this is about money? Lawson replied. No. A pause. It's about survival. The investigators exchanged looks. Emily knew. She knew the people involved were willing to do anything. The recording continued. Lawson tried to convince her to stop. He told her that exposing the truth would destroy families, destroy the town, destroy innocent people. Emily responded, No, it will destroy people who deserve it. Then another voice entered. Harold Whitaker. His voice was calm, almost gentle. That made it worse, because anger was expected. Threats were expected. But Whitaker sounded like someone having a normal conversation, someone who believed he was still in control. Emily, you don't know what you're doing. She answered, I know exactly what I'm doing. Whitaker, you found documents. Emily, I found proof. A long silence. Then Whitaker asked, Who else knows? That question changed everything, because it showed the real fear. Not that Emily knew. That Emily had told someone else. The recording continued. Emily refused to answer. Lawson became nervous. Whitaker became colder. Then Emily said something investigators had never heard before. I made copies. The room went silent, because everyone understood. Emily had planned for this. She knew the danger. She had protected herself. Somewhere, there was another copy, another piece of evidence, another secret waiting. The recording continued. Whitaker asked, Where are they? Emily said nothing. Then footsteps. A struggle. The tape became distorted. Someone knocked over the recorder. The final clear sound was Emily's voice. Not screaming, not crying. A warning. If something happens to me. Static. The truth will come back. Then the recording ended. The laboratory was silent, because for the first time, investigators heard Emily Carter's final moments. Not rumors, not assumptions, her actual voice, her determination, her warning. But the tape created another mystery. The question that had haunted Mercer since the beginning. Where were the copies? If Emily made copies of the evidence, where did she hide them? The search of the underground office continued. Investigators examined every inch. Behind walls, under floors, inside cabinets. Then a technician discovered something unusual. A loose panel beneath the desk. Behind it was a small compartment. Inside was a sealed envelope. The writing on the front immediately caught Mercer's attention. It was Emily's handwriting. The envelope said, "For whoever finally finds this." Everyone stopped. The moment they had been searching for had arrived. The envelope was opened carefully. Inside was a letter, written by Emily Carter, not before her disappearance. During it, the date at the top read, November 3rd, 1981, 11:52 p.m., the final hour of her life. The first line was simple. "If you are reading this, then I was right." Mercer continued. Emily wrote that she knew Lawson, Whitaker, and others were involved. She knew they would try to erase evidence. She knew they would control the investigation. But she also knew something else. Someone inside their organization was afraid. Someone who secretly helped her. The letter ended with a sentence that shocked investigators. "The person who saves me will be the person everyone believes is guilty." Mercer looked up, because that changed the entire story. There was another person involved. Someone investigators had suspected. Someone who appeared connected. Someone who may not have been the enemy. The question was, who? The answer was hidden in the final line of Emily's letter. Only 4 words. A name that would reopen every assumption made in the case. Trust Nathan Hale. The name written at the bottom of Emily Carter's final letter changed the entire investigation. Trust Nathan Hale. For weeks, investigators had viewed Nathan as a witness, a frightened mechanic, a man who cleaned evidence because he was pressured, someone who knew more than he admitted. But nobody expected him to be the person Emily trusted. The same man who spent 43 years carrying guilt. The same man who believed his silence helped destroy her chance of survival. Now detectives had to reconsider everything. Because if Emily trusted Nathan, then the story was not as simple as everyone believed. Nathan Hale was not just a witness. He was part of Emily's final plan. Detective Mercer returned to every interview he had conducted with Nathan. Every pause, every hesitation, every moment where the old mechanic seemed afraid. Before, Mercer thought fear meant guilt. Now, he wondered if it meant something else. Fear of failing, fear of remembering, fear of what would happen if the truth finally came out. The investigators brought Nathan back for another interview. This time, they placed Emily's letter on the table. Nathan stared at the handwriting. His expression changed immediately. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he whispered, "She actually did it." Mercer leaned forward. "Did what?" Nathan touched the edge of the paper. "She found a way." "A way to do what?" Nathan looked up, to make sure they couldn't erase everything. The room became quiet. Mercer asked a question he had been waiting to ask. "Why did Emily trust you?" Nathan looked down. "Because I was the only person who was scared enough to tell her the truth." The old mechanic explained that he first met Emily months before her disappearance. Not through the investigation, not through Northridge, through a simple repair. Emily brought her father's old truck to Nathan's workshop. During the repair, she noticed documents inside the glove compartment. Land records, old contracts, names. She asked Nathan about them. At first, he refused to answer. He knew what happened to people who questioned Northridge timber. But Emily kept asking. She did not threaten him. She did not pressure him. She simply wanted to know why families in the area were suddenly losing their properties. Nathan eventually told her what he knew. And that was the moment everything changed. Emily discovered that the land deals were connected to something much larger. Northridge Timber had been buying land through intimidation. But the most valuable properties were not the forests. They were the areas beneath them. mineral rights, hidden resources. The company had discovered something underground, something worth millions, and anyone standing in the way became a problem. Nathan admitted that he was not brave. He was afraid. But Emily was different. She believed people could still do the right thing. Mercer asked, "Then why didn't you go to police?" Nathan laughed quietly, a bitter laugh, because the police were already involved. That sentence carried the weight of the entire case. The system that should have protected Emily was part of the reason she disappeared. Nathan revealed that Emily had planned everything carefully. She knew she could not simply walk into the sheriff's office. She knew Lawson controlled the investigation, so she created backups, copies, hidden records. She gave pieces of information to different people, a safety net. If one person disappeared, the truth would still survive. Mercer asked, "What happened the night she disappeared?" Nathan closed his eyes. "I thought I could save her." He explained that after Emily left Black Pine Ridge, he followed from a distance. He saw Lawson's vehicle. He saw Whitaker's men. He saw Emily being taken toward the old mine. Nathan wanted to call for help, but he knew calling the sheriff meant calling the person responsible. So he made another choice. He followed them. Inside the mine, he heard the argument. He heard Emily demand that the evidence be released. He heard Whitaker threaten her. But then something unexpected happened. Someone arrived. Someone nobody expected. Someone who changed the outcome. Mercer immediately asked, "Who?" Nathan looked at him. "Owa Lusoneson." The room froze, because nobody had considered him. James Lawson. At the time, he was 23 years old. He worked at Northridge. He had never been interviewed. His name appeared nowhere in the original investigation. Nathan explained that James arrived after hearing what his father planned. He was not there to help hide the evidence. He was there to stop it. He hated what his father became. Mercer asked, "Did he save Emily?" Nathan looked away. "I don't know." That answer bothered Mercer. "You were there." "I was outside." "Then what did you see?" Nathan took a deep breath. "I saw James arguing with his father." The old mechanic described the scene. James confronted Lawson. He accused him of destroying lives. He accused Whitaker of controlling everyone. Then he told Emily something that changed everything. He said he knew where the original records were hidden. Mercer looked at the evidence board, the hidden archive, the missing pages, the secret rooms, everything connected. Nathan continued. James wanted to take Emily away. But someone else arrived. Another person, another vehicle, another secret. A dark sedan entered Black Pine Ridge. The same vehicle seen in the old photographs. But this time, Nathan saw the driver. He saw the person who had been missing from the entire investigation. The person who had controlled everything from behind the scenes. The person even Whitaker feared. Mercer asked, "Who was driving?" Nathan stared at him, then said the name investigators had never expected. Emily's father. The room went silent, because for 43 years, everyone believed Emily's father was a grieving victim, a man destroyed by losing his daughter. But Nathan's confession suggested something else. A father who knew more than he admitted. A father who may have helped create the mystery. A father who had spent decades demanding answers, while hiding the biggest secret himself. Investigators immediately reopened every interview with Thomas Carter, Emily's father. They reviewed every statement, every television appearance, every public speech. And suddenly, they noticed something nobody had seen before. Thomas Carter never once asked investigators to find who was responsible. He only asked them to find Emily. A subtle difference. But after 43 years, it became impossible to ignore. The investigation turned toward the Carter family, and when detectives searched an old storage building belonging to Emily's father, they found a hidden box. Inside were letters, photographs, and one final document, a document dated 3 days before Emily disappeared, signed by Thomas Carter. And the contents revealed a secret that would destroy everything people believed about the Carter family. The discovery inside Thomas Carter's storage building changed the investigation in a way nobody expected. For 43 years, the Carter family had been viewed as the victims: a grieving father, a devastated mother, a daughter taken away before she had the chance to live her life. The community remembered Thomas Carter as the man who never stopped searching, the man who walked through forests every winter, the man who refused to remove Emily's photograph from the wall. But the hidden box told a different story. Inside were dozens of documents, old letters, financial records, photographs, and one agreement signed 3 days before Emily disappeared. A land agreement, a North Ridge timber contract, with one signature at the bottom: Thomas Carter. Detective Mercer stared at the document. The signature was clear, the date was clear, and the implications were impossible to ignore. Emily's father had been connected to North Ridge Timber, the same company she was investigating, the same company she believed was hiding something, the same company connected to the people who wanted her silent. Mercer immediately ordered a complete review of Thomas Carter's history. What they discovered shocked everyone. Thomas Carter was not simply a farmer. Before buying his family property, he worked as a survey consultant. He specialized in land evaluation. He knew exactly how valuable certain areas of Maine could become, including the land controlled by North Ridge. For years, he had worked with companies purchasing forest properties, including North Ridge Timber. The question investigators now faced was brutal. Did Thomas Carter know what his daughter discovered, or was he part of it? The answer came from another document inside the hidden box, a letter written by Emily, not to police, not to a friend, to her father. The letter was never sent. The first sentence immediately caught Mercer's attention. "I know you think you're protecting me." The letter continued, "But protecting me from the truth is not the same as protecting me." Emily knew. She knew her father had a connection to North Ridge. She knew he had signed documents. She knew he had information. But she also believed something else. Her father was afraid. Not powerful, not controlling, afraid. Emily wrote that Thomas had tried to convince her to stop investigating, not because he wanted to help North Ridge, because he knew what they were capable of. She described a conversation between them days before she disappeared. Thomas told her, "You don't know what these people do when they feel threatened." Emily responded, "Then why are you still helping them?" The letter ended there. No answer, no explanation, only a sentence written at the bottom. "Dad knows what first copy is." Mercer read that line several times. The first copy, not the only copy, not the final copy. The first, meaning Emily had created multiple backups. And Thomas knew where one was hidden. Investigators searched every property connected to the Carter family: the farmhouse, the barn, the old workshop, the fields. Nothing, until they examined the original family home, a place that had remained untouched since Thomas died. Inside the attic, behind old insulation, they found another compartment. Inside, a small wooden box. And inside that box, a cassette tape. The label contained only one date: November 2nd, 1981, the night before Emily disappeared. The recording began with a man's voice. Thomas Carter. He sounded exhausted, broken. "I don't know how much longer I can do this." A woman's voice answered, "Emily, you should have told me years ago." The room went silent, because this was not a conversation between strangers. It was a conversation between a daughter and a father who both knew the truth. Emily asked, "How many people are involved?" Thomas replied, "Too many." She asked, "Is Lawson one of them?" Silence. Then, "Yes." Whitaker. Another silence. "Yes." Then Emily asked a question that revealed everything. "And you?" Thomas did not answer. The recording captured several seconds of silence. Then his voice. Quiet. Broken. "I made a mistake." Emily responded, "A mistake doesn't destroy people's lives." Thomas replied, "I was trying to keep you alive." The recording continued. Thomas explained that years earlier, he helped North Ridge identify valuable land. He believed it was just business. He believed he was helping development. He did not know how far they would go until people started disappearing, families losing homes, workers threatened, documents altered. By the time he realized what was happening, it was too late. He was trapped. And then Emily discovered everything. The recording ended with Thomas saying, "If they know you have the documents, they won't stop. Then I won't stop either." A few hours later, she vanished. The discovery changed how investigators viewed Thomas Carter. He was not the mastermind. He was not innocent either. He was something far more complicated. A man who helped build a system he later feared. A man who spent decades mourning the consequences of his own choices. But one mystery remained. If Thomas knew Emily was in danger, why didn't he save her? The answer came from a final document hidden beneath the cassette. A handwritten note. Thomas's handwriting. Only one sentence. "I was there when she disappeared." The investigation froze. Because that meant Thomas Carter knew exactly what happened. He wasn't hearing rumors. He wasn't guessing. He was present, the grieving father, the man who searched for his daughter, the man who stood before cameras asking for answers, had been at the scene the entire time. Mercer reopened the timeline. November 3rd, 1981. Emily leaves school. She meets Lawson. She is taken to Black Pine Ridge. Whitaker arrives. Nathan witnesses the confrontation. James Lawson tries to intervene. Thomas Carter arrives. And then, something happens. Something that explains why Emily disappeared forever. Investigators searched Thomas Carter's remaining belongings one more time. They found a final piece of evidence. A photograph, taken at Black Pine Ridge. The image showed 4 people standing outside the mine entrance. Howard Lawson, Harold Whitaker, Thomas Carter, and Emily. But there was something unusual. Emily was not restrained. She was not being forced into the mine. She was standing beside them willingly, almost as if she had made a decision, almost as if she trusted someone there. On the back of the photograph were 7 words, written by Emily. "The person I trust is here." And suddenly the entire case changed again, because the biggest question was no longer who betrayed Emily. It was, who was the person she still believed could save her? The photograph sat in the center of the evidence room. 4 people, 1 night, 1 location. 43 years of unanswered questions compressed into a single image. Howard Lawson, Harold Whitaker, Thomas Carter, Emily Carter, the 4 names that had shaped the entire investigation. For decades, investigators searched for a stranger, someone hiding in the darkness, someone who took Emily away. But the photograph revealed something far more complicated. Emily was not surrounded by strangers. She was surrounded by people she knew, people she trusted, people who had been part of her life. Detective Mercer studied every detail. Emily's expression, her posture, the distance between each person. She did not look like someone being held captive. She looked like someone preparing for a confrontation. The back of the photograph carried Emily's handwritten message. "The person I trust is here." Mercer kept returning to those words. Not, "The person who will save me." Not, "The person who knows the truth." But, "The person I trust." Someone among those 4. Someone Emily believed would choose the right side. The investigation team reopened every possibility. Howard Lawson was the obvious suspect. His corruption was already exposed. His role in hiding evidence was confirmed. But Lawson was dead. Harold Whitaker was also dead. Thomas Carter was dead. Only one person from that photograph remained alive, and investigators had never properly questioned her. Emily Carter's mother, Sarah Carter. For 43 years, Sarah had been viewed only as a grieving parent. She rarely spoke publicly after Emily disappeared. She avoided interviews. She refused documentaries. When reporters came to her door, she politely asked them to leave. The community believed grief had taken away her desire to speak. Mercer wondered if it was something else. The interview was conducted at Sarah's home. She was 82 years old, fragile, quiet. But when Mercer placed the photograph on the table, her expression changed. Not surprise, Recognition. You found it. Mercer froze. You knew about this photograph? Sarah looked down. I thought it was gone forever. The detective leaned forward. Mrs. Carter, why didn't you tell anyone? Sarah remained silent. Then she answered, because Emily asked me not to. That sentence changed everything. Emily had not only trusted Nathan, she had trusted her mother. Sarah explained that 2 days before Emily disappeared, her daughter came to her house late at night. She was frightened, not panicked, not broken, determined. Emily told her mother everything. The documents, the land deals, the people involved, the hidden records, and the one person she believed could help her, her father, Thomas Carter. Sarah admitted she hated that decision. She knew Thomas was connected to Northridge. She knew he had made mistakes. But Emily believed her father still had a conscience. She believed he could expose everything. She thought he was going to confess. Mercer asked, "Did he?" Sarah looked away. The room became quiet. Why? Afraid of Whitaker? Sarah shook her head, afraid of what would happen after. Mercer did not understand. Sarah explained. Thomas had spent years collecting evidence, not for Northridge, against them. After realizing what the company was doing, he secretly began keeping copies of records. But he waited years. He was afraid. Then Emily discovered the same information, and unlike her father, she was willing to act. Sarah revealed something investigators never knew. The night before Emily disappeared, she and Thomas planned a meeting, not with police, not with reporters, with someone inside Northridge, someone willing to testify, someone who had access to the final evidence. Mercer asked, "Who?" Sarah reached for an old notebook. Her hands shook. Inside was a name, Michael Crane, the county surveyor, the same man whose name appeared in the underground files, the same man connected to property transfers, the same man investigators had ignored for decades. Sarah explained that Michael Crane was the person Emily trusted, not Lawson, not Whitaker, not even her father. Crane had secretly helped Emily understand the land records. He had discovered that Northridge was hiding something underground, something valuable, something that explained why the company wanted certain properties. But Michael Crane disappeared 3 days after Emily. Officially, a boutin accident. His body was never recovered. The case was closed. Another disappearance. Another unanswered question. Mercer immediately searched Michael Crane's old records. What they found was shocking. The same night Emily disappeared, Crane's office was broken into. Files were stolen. The official report blamed burglary, but the original police notes described something different. The thief searched only one location, a hidden cabinet containing land surveys. Not money, not valuables. Information. Mercer realized a pattern. Emily, Michael Crane, Nathan Hade, Walter Briggs, all connected by one thing. They each possessed a piece of the truth, and every one of them was silenced, except one, Sarah Carter. She had survived because Emily protected her. Mercer asked the question that mattered most. What happened at Black Pine Ridge that night? Sarah closed her eyes. I don't know everything, but you know something. She nodded. I know Emily came home. Mercer froze. What? Sarah looked directly at him. She came home after the meeting. The room went completely silent, because every official theory said Emily disappeared at Black Pine Ridge. But Sarah was saying something impossible. Emily survived, at least for a short time. How long? Sarah swallowed. Long enough to say goodbye. Mercer felt a chill. Why didn't you report it? Sarah looked toward the window. Because she made me promise. What promise? Sarah answered. She told me if I loved her, I had to let everyone believe she was gone. Mercer struggled to understand. Why would she ask that? Sarah opened the old notebook. Inside was another message from Emily. The final words were clear. If they think I am dead, they will stop looking for me. Mercer stared at the page, because the impossible possibility was now becoming real. Emily Carter may not have been killed in 1981. She may have escaped. She may have disappeared by choice. But if that was true, where had she gone? And why had she never returned? Sarah slowly placed another photograph on the table. A photograph taken years after Emily vanished. A photograph that had been hidden for decades. In the background was a woman. Older, different hair, different name, but the same face, the same eyes. Sarah whispered she was alive. And for the first time in 43 years, the cold case was no longer about finding Emily Carter's killer. It was about finding Emily Carter herself.